So before I introduce, had to do it. Before I introduce our guest speaker today, Athena Karp, I just want to, this is full disclosure, I've known Athena since she was a little bit of a thing, and she's always had this entrepreneurial instinct, which in her earliest days at the Agnes Irwin School, when they were fundraising, Athena was on Locust Walk at Penn's campus, which is a few blocks from her dad's office, selling was it Rice Krispies, right? And lemonade and brownies, right, packaged right. So from very early on, Athena was a great salesperson. She always pulled off these little minor miracles and was able to draw cash out of the pockets of even, relatively poor students. So yeah, so that's Athena, that little bit of a thing, plying students with her sweet wares. And she's sort of blown the doors off that skill set in the way that she spends her time now. So this is Athena. Athena is a graduate of Georgetown University. She has done really remarkable things in the context of this incarnation, HiredScore. All of us are talking about artificial intelligence in healthcare. Athena is taking artificial intelligence and finding applications for that in HR, and that's in part what she'll be talking to you about. But what I think is especially, first of all, it's a binational company. She has a really interesting commute, which we were just talking about. So she flies between New York and Tel Aviv, which are the two bases of HiredScore. And in our little recitation on why that is, Athena just said, when you want to be in this business, you have to get the people that are best in it. And so that's what she's doing. She's building a company that is being used by Fortune 500 companies quite a bit. She was just named a fellow, a Henry Crown Fellow for this year, and please check out the latest edition of The Economist. The first two paragraphs focuses on the work of HiredScore and Athena's really remarkable skills. So I have to say, you made a godmother proud, girl. I'm just really happy to have you here and happy to have you talking to all of our folks that aspire to startups, to using the technology of the present and the future in ways that all of us would like to see new things happen. And I'm thrilled, delighted, and so proud of you.
Is this on? Great. Well, I've never had an introduction that included pictures of me that I've not seen at the age of 7 before, especially not those of me pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors at the age of 7. Donna's my godmother and been in my life since I was born. So really grateful to be here to participate in the amazing Jefferson Innovation endeavor. I've spent the last 2 days visiting Lyft Labs and a lot of the exciting things that are going on in Philadelphia. And just really excited, I think, by all the different initiatives and the ways that entrepreneurs are being encouraged and drawn and attached to different ideas. So grateful to be here speaking. Donna, thank you so much. A pleasure. And what I think you all are here to hear more about and talk about is artificial intelligence powering the future of work. My background, in between my Rice Krispie business and HiredScore, I was an investor actually focused on big data, automating highly regulated data environments focused on healthcare. So, we'd start with big theses like, how can we give doctors back an hour of their day to see patients using machine learning? And what that meant was explainable algorithms, compliant algorithms, knowing where an algorithm should start and stop, which is a really important point. So I think in anything we do, understanding what data is available, what's the limits of that data set, what are the human capabilities that would be better either automated or augmented with a next generation technology, and how do we plan for future phases of automation and technology. So my own background moving from the healthcare space was very excited about HR data, particularly around how data and algorithms could unlock diversity hiring and hiring for the future of jobs, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today, a different angle than what you probably read and hear about in the news. But I spent 2 years looking for something like this in the space, and when I couldn't find that as an investor, I left to start that company myself. So I know we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs in the room, happy to talk after. The first thing I thought about, as Donna said, was to build artificial intelligence in new areas, you need a best-in-class AI and data engineering team. And I'd seen a lot of great entrepreneurs with exciting ideas where the technology and the algorithms fell short and were unable to deliver on the business value, really because of the tech, not because of the overarching thesis or product vision. And for us, I wanted to always lead with the technology. So I moved 6,000 miles away. I didn't know anyone in Israel, but I'd read a lot about the things going on in the artificial intelligence space there. I'd seen a lot of Israeli entrepreneurs come in and building brilliant technology without business plans, versus in the States, I saw a lot of great business plans without the tech. So kind of thinking about marrying the two, and our company just celebrated its 5-year birthday. We have a wonderful data science and engineering lab based in Tel Aviv, and then have some of my HiredScore peers here, our sales, marketing, partnerships, all of that's based in the States. We work with Fortune 500 clients, which is part of what's informing this presentation to you all today. Great. So can we just zoom it out a little bit? That would be okay. And thank you for those joining virtually. We'll try to give shout outs and include you guys as much as possible in the discussion. So I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about the future of work, about job automation, about self-driving cars and the impact that's going to have. We're going to touch on elements of that, but actually from a different angle than what most people are talking about or thinking about. And that's really, we've seen a light shown into that aspect based on the unique data that we process and the types of clients we're able to work with. So when we start kind of with the 20th century, saw the glorification of the corporate career path. And this is the, start in the mailroom, work your way up to the corner office, the executive chair, and then get the company watch. And that is the company watch. And that's the, lifetime employee, and probably what most of our parents or grandparents' generation were best known for. When you think about work, that's what it meant. And really commit yourself to what the company that you're working in needs versus your own career paths or your own skills or your own potential skills that have not yet been unlocked. Similarly, a lot of the technology that is used to basically put people in jobs has shifted dramatically over time. We won't start with the drawings in caves, but what we'll start with is the 1800s, 1900s. This was where bulletins, paper, newspapers were used to post jobs. And the biggest shift and transition from that to online job postings, which started in 1990s with companies like Monster, predecessors of Career Builder, was that for the first time, you couldn't control the eyeballs and the people viewing those jobs. So when jobs are posted locally and bulletins, you're getting Philadelphia residents for your roles that are based in Philadelphia. When you move to jobs being posted online, you now activate potentially global, global workforces who might be interested in that job and might be interested in applying, which dramatically increased the diversity of people applying, the scope and the scale of people applying to jobs, and really the global reach. And kind of the hiring goes virtual. This was the beginning of the 21st century. We have video interviewing. We have all different types of new tools and technology that can just continue this trend of unlocking not necessarily local and not necessarily the same types of talent you've been hiring over and over, but different types of talent pools and different types of talent profiles. Most recently, within the last 10 years, we have social tools and technology. So social media has had a dramatic impact. One of the biggest in the world of hiring is to start keeping tabs and navigating passive talent. So this is an ever-growing category, which is there's people that work at your company right now, and then there's those applying to your company right now, and then there's those that you'd like at some point, either because they're young and show a promising career, or because they're a world expert and you want to wait till they're ready to move on to their next challenge and join you. And kind of the passive talent and how that converts companies like LinkedIn are probably the best known for that, in being able to find people who aren't applying to your jobs themselves, but you get to apply and convert. And the most dramatic shift, I believe, we'll see is how artificial intelligence is going to change all of this, which we're just at the earliest phases of. As Donna mentioned, we have in next week's Economist release, there's an article on how artificial intelligence is powering hiring, which is a story of HiredScore and Johnson & Johnson. And one of the most exciting things that we believe that technology can help uncover is giving respect back to candidates. Johnson & Johnson gets over 1 million resumes a year applying into their jobs. They're hiring a very small percentage of that. And so they're actually in the business, as the brilliant VP of Talent, Short Gehring, says they're in the business of saying no to candidates exponentially more than they are at saying yes. How do you do that, one, nicer, quicker, better? And then two, how do you do that in a way that gives the candidate feedback and benefits them and maybe helps direct them to a different job that might be open, that might be a good fit, or a series of online skills and trainings and resources that could make them a better candidate for your company or for other companies? And so this is the place where no human and no manual work process could possibly give that type of a white glove concierge service to 1 million plus candidates applying to a company. But when you think about artificial intelligence being able to understand your current career trajectory, the potential options that you might have, not just at the company you're in right now, but at other companies. So that's one of the most interesting things we see in the data we look at. We've reviewed over 25 million resumes and over 50 million job posts as a company. So we see quite a lot of jobs data. And one of the fascinating things is your career at Jefferson, starting in a very junior role, is very different, or might be very different, than your career at Comcast, starting in that exact same role with that exact same salary, versus Domino's Pizza, starting in that exact same role and exact same salary. And so thinking through how companies can help you navigate kind of that unknown of your career potential or your unknown career potential is what gets us very excited. So we're going to be talking a lot about artificial intelligence. What does artificial intelligence mean? Just wanted to put a basic definition to get us all on the same page. Artificial intelligence is the ability for a computer to perform a task like a human. A computer doesn't teach itself. A computer learns from large amounts of data that teach it reliable, repeatable decision-making over time. And for those of you in the room that are scientists or engineers, I know we're going quite basic, but we'll get to the exciting stuff soon. And so what's exciting about that, actually in the context of HR data, is there's certain industries where if you tried to start an artificial intelligence company today, the data doesn't exist, or the data is very fragmented, or the data is just not robust enough yet to build reliable, repeatable decision-making engines. So one of the big things with self-driving cars is we know the kind of most common routes and the regular driving patterns, but the data doesn't exist yet. It's growing every day. But to know kind of when you turn down a one-way street and there's oncoming traffic, what should the car do? And so because we've had very little amounts of data to teach edge cases, for example, in self-driving cars, we don't yet have that robust data set sitting there to be able to have out-of-the-box, very reliable and high-quality algorithms in many spaces. HR, that is actually not the case. And most people think that their HR data, we hear this at every client, at every meeting, we wish it was cleaner, we wish it was more reliable, we wish it was more robust. But actually, similar to healthcare, because of compliance and regulatory requirements, any company above a certain number of employees has to maintain all the jobs that they create, all the candidates that apply, the candidate statuses that got assigned, so who made it to a first round interview, a final round interview. Also, in some way, shape, or form, they have employee performance data. We use a proxy for that, salary data, to know not are you the best in the class, and we're not trying to reverse engineer for that candidate type, but actually we're just trying to say, for example, did you never show up for your first day of work? If so, probably not a good hire. Or you were fired within the first month, not great. Versus, one-third, 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 the middle or the top one-third of the class, well, that's good data to learn from, that these are the types of people that you should be hiring from. So we also have outcomes in HR data, which is really exciting. We see an average candidate gets assigned 2.5 statuses, and an average employee has over 3.5 job titles. So if you think just on the recruiting data standpoint, if we have a client that gets 1 million resumes a year, times 2.5 statuses, 2.5 million, and they have, 3 years of recruiting system data in the cloud. Usually it's more than that, 5, 6, 7 years. So we're sitting at, often north of 5, 10 million smart human decisions of who they liked, how they moved them forward, who got hired for these jobs. This is how our algorithms learn and are able to capture. And really the coolest thing we do is a job post speaks one language, a candidate speaks another. And actually different candidate types speak different languages. So for example, a civilian candidate speaks a very different language than a military candidate or a veteran, where when you're studying a job's asking for a manager and this person was a pilot, I might not understand, and keyword will certainly never understand, and all the different filtering mechanisms I do today won't have the ability to know how does this connect to what it is I'm looking for this role. And that's actually one of the biggest barriers in companies being able to pursue diverse talent agendas or look for different types of talent, maybe people from minority backgrounds, is that the resumes and the taxonomies aren't the same as what they're used to, and the regular filtering mechanisms, which are very archaic, and other industries and departments would never tolerate that. But in HR, we have kind of a dearth of advanced tools that can overcome that natural language barrier with NLP technologies, or an algorithm that can be adjusted for different candidate types and different data elements. So we'll get into more of that in a bit. So that's what artificial intelligence means according to our definition. There's a lot of panic, and you'll read in the news about how the computers are coming and replacing humans. Artificial intelligence is already here, and it's already powering many different departments, divisions, and job functions within companies today. Often not fully replacing talent, but rather augmenting skill sets that humans might not have or might not have the capacity or time to do as well, and really supercharging different departments and divisions. So 3 of the great examples we like to talk about that are much earlier than HR to get the benefits of artificial intelligence toolkits is things like sales. So people might not know this, but sales technologies have advanced in certain areas to the place where actually an AI can sit on top of your sales representative's call and know, are these areas of the dialogue that are diverging or are going to disinterest the person they're trying to sell, or they're selling a product that is not going to be a good fit for this buyer, and actually provide real-time prompts for better strategizing the sale that they're currently giving in real time. And so it's pretty cool technology. It's also, the AI teams are based in Israel, not far from us. We try to steal talent from each other. Marketing, similarly, a big challenge of marketers is finding new places to market products and goods and new customer populations that they or their competitors have not yet uncovered. And that's where it's very hard to get out of current patterns and the current things you're doing. And an artificial intelligence who's built for discovering kind of greenfield marketing opportunities can often perform, and is today performing, a lot of those client identification and source identification prospecting. Similarly, customer service. When we think about a chatbot or an automated caller, you'll probably think about those that call your phone. Those are really not the cutting edge. What you might not even notice is sometimes when you create a ticket or a customer service, it's actually being handled, or the first level of that is being handled by a bot or an artificial intelligence software tool. And the cool thing is finding the balance between where should an AI be and where should the human be, and then kind of that perfect partnership for today. And as artificial intelligences advance and the accuracy gets better, or new data sets get unlocked for that learning sets, being able to expand that product suite and those capabilities further. Great. So I did say we were going to mention job automation. This is everyone's favorite topic. We love this topic, not from the panic perspective, actually, but we love this topic from an area that many people don't think about, which is the average corporate pyramid. So yes, there are jobs that, according to the World Economic Forum and McKinsey, are very likely to get automated. The number is 20% of today's jobs might be fully or partially automated by 2030. We've all heard that. Also the counter arguments, but those will create new job types and new roles and new skills in need. And all of that's true. But I think what the most interesting part is, where a lot of that automation is going to come is in more junior and lower skilled roles. And that's why we took a sample of a pyramid, things like drivers, which I know we hear a lot about. I'll get into that in 1 second. Telemarketing, tax preparation. So again, anything that's repeatable and done often the same way over and over with a bit of variation, a computer can usually pick up and learn very quickly. And what makes us think a lot about this is, well, what does this mean when certain of those jobs are automated and removed, and that pyramid looks differently? So my favorite example is an amazingly innovative company on this innovation series that's a leader. You probably have the Domino's pizza delivery app, heard a lot of what they do, leveraging data and great technologies. But what most people don't know is Domino's is over 93% franchise owned, so over 5,500 stores. They have 800 franchisees that own and operate those stores across America. Over 90% of franchise owners started as a delivery driver or a pizza maker. So that is the most junior role. That is the role that often doesn't require a degree. And the other hourly workers, that could be a door hanger that start when they're 14 or 15 years old, however the minimum age requirement is for them to start and begin. And so why we think a lot about this is actually where Domino's finds their store owners, which are then at the top of that pyramid, is by sourcing from drivers and pizza makers that then show promise, work their way up, and make their way into owning a franchise, and heavily encourage that. And so what I think is most interesting is, now when we think about what a driverless delivery car might do, let's think about how that might impact that pyramid, that over 90% of the owners came from drivers. When you remove that job, and yes, the car has to figure out the last mile of how it gets from the car to your doorstep with your pizza. I'm sure we will figure that out. We've figured out more complex things before, like going to space. So from that perspective, it's in August 2017 is when Domino's began their first test drive for their self-driving delivery car. And February last month was when they launched in Miami the first 2-month pilot of this self-driving delivery car. That's a picture of it to the left on the bottom. And Ford predicts within 3 years, these will be fully autonomous. And so when you think about what will that mean for the future of how people that are today entering the system and becoming a franchise owner by having that entry-level career, it brings up probably our most favorite topic, which is that Domino's is not alone in this internal talent feeding different elements of that pyramid. These are Fortune 50 companies, Company 1 and Company 2, that are showing you at junior, mid-level, and executive roles that are being fed from junior talent from below. And these numbers are, over 50% of mid-level and over 70% of executives come from people that have, climbed their way up in your company and often started at the lowest or very early jobs that didn't require a lot of skill sets, didn't require maybe certain types of education or certain degrees that today are very hard to get. And so when we think about the impacts of automation, I think the most important thing for us to think about is, as this pyramid gets distorted, who is getting removed from this pyramid at being able to enter companies, and how will we think about getting them into the workforce, getting them ready for the jobs that today they're moving in and holding by nature of the corporate, cycling them through and teaching and training them. And this is where how internal talent pool changes will truly impact hiring. And so we have kind of the 4 areas that we think are most dramatic in this. And one is where talent comes from and what it looks like. So as we just said, if you're used to hiring from this particular department, or you're used to hiring from your hourly workforce who you then give jobs to become salaried workers in this type of replicable format, when those jobs are automated or partially automated, which might not fully eliminate that job, but just dramatically reduce the amount of people you need doing those jobs, where will you then get that talent from? So naturally, who is feeding those roles at your company will likely have dramatic shifts and changes. The next one is rethinking job requirements. And this is the one that we really feel artificial intelligence can have one of the biggest promises for. A lot of times jobs are written, and I see some wonderful HR leaders in the audience, a lot of times jobs are written by hiring managers that are looking for people like them. That's what we do. We look for people like us. It's an unconscious bias that we try to fight, but is very challenging. So when you start to have different talent pools internally, and maybe lower amounts or different types of populations, what that will likely force is a challenge of, do you really need 5 years of relevant industry experience? Does that person really need to come with 3 years of this exact type of management experience? Is that bachelor degree in statistics the minimum requirement, or you really need that master's degree, which is going to dramatically shorten not just the amount of people we can look at, but that's going to dramatically limit the amount of diverse candidates we can look at, because that's a degree type where this gender group and this ethnicity group is dominant and very little else. And so challenging that job requirements is one of the most important pieces when we think about the future of work, and how an artificial intelligence can give you confidence that, internally when you're hiring, most of these people don't have MBAs. Maybe you don't need that MBA when you're hiring externally either. And so really thinking about that from a data-driven approach. Another one is evaluating what can be taught and trained. So very similarly, as we're rethinking the types of skills required to hold a job, that doesn't mean that the way we were defining that role today might have been certain types of experience that we want to forgo that, but maybe we realize as a company that corporate training, online courses, e-credentials can actually give you that type of relevant experience and that type of credible training that is similar to what you would have gotten in a different company or in a different role type. And the last is the fluidity of talent. And so this is one of the things that's written often about millennials and the rise of gig workers and the rise of project-based work is people are increasingly, instead of that career path employee that we talked about in the beginning, people are increasingly looked for varied experiences, different types of challenges and different types of work that will make them think differently or give them different skill sets, or just hone in on a specialty they have at very different types of companies. So we see a lot of data scientists, for example, love large data sets, but maybe they want to experience healthcare data, HR data, marketing data, because they like the diversity and the way that that makes them think. And so the fluidity of talent is a really important piece that companies have to adjust for, which might mean you hire people for 3 months instead of that 3 to 4 year position that you're used to hiring them for, to get that skill set and brain power on board for a certain project or certain type of work, but not necessarily forever in your company. And so kind of how will this affect who we hire and what we look for in talent? And a lot of these are the things we've been talking about. The full-time permanent employee, we have clients, for example, that over 50% of their workforce today is now gig project-based workers. And that was really an overnight shift over the last 3 to 7 years, that the type of talent that they were looking for was increasingly looking for different types of projects, different types of experience, and was actually looking not to be hired as a full-time employee, but to be hired for a skill set or task that they're great at performing and want to do at different types of companies. Hiring from locations and nearby a physical office. This is another big shift we see. Companies needing to think about remote alternatives. And one example that we get excited about is by thinking about mothers re-entering the workforce, maybe to be able to achieve certain types of diversity goals for certain types of positions that have a critical level of experience. You actually need to offer this job as remote because that mother is taking care of kids at home, but does want to participate and does want to be in the workforce, which might not fit exactly the model that you're used to of every employee coming every day to the office, but you almost have to rethink, how badly do I want this skill? How badly do I want this different viewpoint? And how does that mean I shift whom I hire and where I hire them from, and even the concept of a physical office? And the last is talent markets supplying hiring demands. So that's kind of one of the slides that towards the end is really talking about the mismatch of skills and job openings that we have in today's labor market, which is at over 6 million today as of January. That was released last week by the Department of Labor. And that's an exciting opportunity, I think, for online learning, for online credentials, for corporate training programs, who identify the skills that are very difficult to fill because the jobs are taking 2, 3, 4 months to fill, or impossible to fill without spending a tremendous amount of money. And how do you think about maybe training certain people from within that look differently, or being able to provide that type of training in some cost-effective way to an external population, to a candidate applying to the job and giving them that feedback, letting them train on their own, and then come to you more prepared. And so really, how can artificial intelligence support the future of work? These are the exciting things that it can unlock and do for all of us. Achieve hiring goals. So, for example, you're a company who for the first time needs to hire people in blockchain department. And that's a skill that has only appeared very recently. You're going to have a very hard time finding very experienced people in the blockchain space on the job market. And those that you find that do exist are going to be tremendously expensive. But that's where an artificial intelligence can help you understand what can be taught, what can be trained, what does someone actually need to arrive with, and what are different ways of evaluating and assessing that. For certain jobs, assessment tests. For other jobs, gamification is being experimented in. A video interview can tell you everything you need to know about their outgoing and their passion and their enthusiasm to then be plugged into a rigorous training session. And so that's kind of one of the most exciting things that an artificial intelligence can bring in being able to close these gaps. Another one is more satisfied candidates and managers. So we fight at our company very hard for this concept of giving respect back to candidates. And as jobs moved from bulletins to newspapers where you had a finite amount of eyeballs looking at them, to online where now that's dramatically opened the funnel of people who see the job and now apply, to social media, which amplifies that job even further. Companies are experiencing a wider and wider funnel of people applying to jobs. People might not be ready for the job they're applying for. It might be aspirational, or it might not be aligned with the requirements that have been specified. But how can you let them hear back quickly? How can you let them hear back with advice and feedback of what would make them more aligned to this job you now know that they're interested in? Or help direct them to other jobs in your company that can get them started there and would be a great place for now, and maybe work their way into those other types of jobs. 100% candidate inclusion. So we talked about a lot of companies pursuing hiring veterans. That's a big initiative at a lot of large companies. One of the biggest challenges, as we mentioned, is job posts are written for civilian jobs, right? It says we want you to have 4 years of sales management experience at these type of companies in these types of industries. And when you come out of a very well-rewarded 15-year military experience, that doesn't speak the same language. So keywords, recruiters that haven't been trained to understand how to read veteran resumes or might not have a training for a specific military unit. HiredScore hires from the cybersecurity units, which don't look the same as the cyber startup or the cyber corporate space units. So being able to know that, and then also as we get to the gig economy and project-based workers, most of these people don't have resumes. They just have a list of projects they've done at a list of different companies, and being able to, on the back end, understand different data types and different candidates to connect them to a job is one of the most exciting promises that AI can do in helping us unlock diversity and different types of talent coming into your organization. And the last piece is process automation. And so there's a lot of processes today. We get a lot of companies that come to us and say, these jobs take 3, 4, 5 weeks to fill. We know it should be quicker and faster. How much do you think an algorithm can shave off? For us, we see in some places as much as 90% of the process, which means people in jobs quicker for jobs that need to be filled and for oftentimes people that want a job today. So it's a perfect marriage of how do you use that technology for good and alignment with both business goals and people's goals. So this was that chart I mentioned to you all before, that really when you see these numbers, 6.3 million open jobs in the US today. This is as of the end of January. The caveat is those jobs are open for a number of different reasons, but all of those jobs aren't data scientists who can code. Certainly most of them are not. So they're not incredibly difficult skill sets. It's often, basic technical literacy or basic data mining skill sets or basic service industry skill sets. And just the mismatch between the available talent pool and those that want to hold jobs and what the jobs are requiring today is an ever-growing. And that's why when we think about automation, you're often just continuing to add to that pool of people that want to hold a job but aren't positioned for the jobs of the future. And so that growing mismatch is what we get really excited about technology being able to be the bridge between that, give feedback on both sides, and help close a lot of those gaps. And just to end these, how will AI help us unlock some of the largest HR challenges of tomorrow, or today actually, because most of these are often here, and hiring differently, so removing the barriers of different candidate types and different data types, the new age of learning. So translating, it might not be, sorry, Jefferson, but it might not be the regular academic experience for all types of jobs and roles. Maybe an online course or an e-credential or even a free Coursera course can offer the validation that you have the skill set and the raw talent to be able to perform this function for a company that's looking for that validation. Unlocking mobility, again, so how do you take the driver and make them a franchise owner and really change their life and change the life of those around you? Often technology can help us predict that and understand trends and patterns we're seeing at certain companies but not other companies, or that is actually happening within your company but could be happening much more often. And the last piece is bias-free decision making. And why we mentioned this last is because the press likes to talk a lot about how artificial intelligence will often perpetuate biases, often learn from human making decisions, which we talked about in the beginning is how an AI is created. And even if it's unconscious bias, bias does exist, and then perpetuate that fully and have that now part of every decision making. HiredScore and a bunch of other companies in other highly regulated data industries are doing big pushes for this other breed of algorithms. There's black box algorithms, and there's also fully explainable, fully transparent, fully testable algorithms that can do an even better job than a human at detecting a bias, understanding the root cause of the bias, understanding the data that is generating that bias to exclude it, to also give feedback to the process of where that process is generating that. So we found, for example, high correlations of the word golf on a resume and candidates being selected. And this was not a golf professional job. It was a job where golf had no relevance whatsoever to the skill set needed. And that's where, when you start to pick that up, one, that creates a gender bias. Two, that often creates an ethnic profile bias from what you want to be hiring. And three, it's not legal and it's not job related. And so get that out of a correlating decision parameter. And kind of that's the last piece that we think is kind of the next forefront, is not generating bias, but actually detecting, removing that from the process, and giving feedback to people of where and how that's being applied. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
So I know that there are going to be a lot of questions. Let me start over here.
Thank you very much, Athena. Two questions, actually. I thought that the key piece in the very beginning was knowing where the algorithms end. Let's take hiring. Where do the algorithms end, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And actually, we as a company, if someone wants to get rid of all recruiters and have an algorithm make the decision from start to finish of who exactly gets hired and hiring that person, we will never sell that product. One, the technology is not there. Two, we don't think that's the right place for the algorithm. The right place for the algorithm is kind of, the best way to think about it in hiring is the top of funnel, right? So you have a job that gets created. Our algorithms, for example, will scan automatically and instantly every single person who's ever applied in the past in your company. Often when a candidate gets rejected, they'll hear, "We'll keep you in mind if there's a relevant job in the future for you," right, and get back to you. That never happens. Why? Because humans don't go through that database manually and look at 6 million profiles in the past every time they have a job. So these types of tasks that aren't happening but should happen today is where we get excited. Similarly, for jobs that you have large amounts of candidates applying, 50, 100, 300, 400, 500 candidates. We see, for example, in India, we are global, so our clients post a job within 72 hours, they'll get over 15,000 candidates. There's no way a human can go through everyone with the respect that each candidate deserves to be able to give feedback. One, we find on average between 15 and 20% of candidates don't meet job requirements. So let those people know right away. If I hear back and I apply to a job and you tell me within an hour, we're not going to move forward with you because we're looking for this credential and you don't have that and that's a requirement, but thank you for applying, I'll feel much differently and kind of feel much more respected in that feedback loop. Where humans kind of are most powerful is the interviewing process, the face-to-face with the candidates that have been selected, the meeting with the manager who this hire is for, and moving people along. So kind of that last mile end process as well as usually onboarding.
I don't know if I could actually say this properly, but I hope to get it out. The Johnson & Johnson, for example, they hire you. How do they know that it was a worthwhile thing to pursue this? What are their parameters for your success?
Yeah. So in most companies that we work with, I won't speak to that exact one, I'll speak generally because of confidentiality and others. But in the companies that we work with, HR departments are metrics driven already. They're constantly tracking and monitoring things like candidate experience and satisfaction. hiring manager satisfaction with the candidates that have been put forward. We see right away a spike in the general overall happiness level of a candidate when they hear back quicker and they hear back more often. We have some clients where as many as 50% of the people who apply never hear back. So if you plug in an algorithm and you start hearing back, not never and not within a few weeks, but within a few days, you see satisfaction levels spike. Similarly, the reduction of recruiter screening and sourcing time, we see over 90% reduction. So the metrics that are used there, time to find, time to present, time to first interview, you can just see the amount of days that gets cut down on that, as well as the diversity of the candidates. So is the algorithm representing and adequately recommending veteran candidates, and are they being considered then in the process more frequently than before? So a lot of quantitative metrics that you can measure that really show the success and the impact of a partially automated, augmented hiring process.
So Athena, we also have a tweet question. How are you ensuring that algorithms are as unbiased as possible? Has been a big problem in other areas.
Yeah, so this is a great topic and a really interesting area. We, from my background in the healthcare space, kind of gave me the crash course that you need to have this breed of explainable, transparent algorithms that really justify any automated decision-making processes. And I'm sure that speaks to you all. And so what that means in the HR space in terms of the defensibility or is a few things, kind of 5 parameters. One, understand the data coming in and understand the data coming out. So that's kind of one of the big problems with a black box algorithm is it doesn't know, one, what's being fed in, and it doesn't know what's being generated out. We build our algorithms in a way where any machine learning we do is controlled around very particular areas that are then documented, logged, and kind of snapshotted to be able to then review why did it like this person and not this person, make sure it was job related, which is the US government for EEO and OFCCP companies requirement to make sure that it's related to the parameters of the job and not related to another trend we saw in data was fraternity names and sorority names, which is certainly not job related in any way. So being able to control machine learning around job related parameters, creating decision snapshots, creating extensive data logging. In our algorithms, we go many steps further just to make sure our clients are protected by being able to control that diversity data, race and gender data never even enters the algorithm. So on a logical system architecture end is physically separated. And further derivatives of that are also separated. And finally, we do automated testing. So before any improvement to the algorithm, any feature goes live, we test it across every client to ensure that it doesn't introduce a bias. And if it does, that will never go live. So there are actually a lot of different ways that these can be tested. It's just making sure that the solutions that you work with are using that. And testing and kind of treating compliance as an utmost importance, not an obstacle to using a cool technology.
Hey there. So I'm going to go back to your blockchain thing. Let's say that I want to hire somebody in blockchain, but I know that it's new and it's going to be hard and it's going to be expensive and there aren't that many, as you said. So is part of what you're doing with your AI telling me, here's the profile of a person you could interview for, post a job for, who may not have anything about blockchain on their resume right now, but our data shows that they would be amenable or quickly trained to do that in a way that was most likely to be successful? Is that, maybe you can tell a little bit about
Exactly.
how that part works.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that, depending on where a company sits on the kind of innovation curve. So a lot of the Fortune 1, 2, 300 companies we work with have very robust systems, very good multi-year data practices, and a large availability of data to learn from. So that's a benefit we have in the client base that we work with. But from that, for example, if you link into learning management systems and employee learning and training systems, we can study, if you marry that with employee performance data, who learned what and how did they do when they were hired for a different type of job, and then how did they perform after when they moved up to different roles. So there's a lot of kind of data clarity that you can bring in certainty. If I told you that I know it seems crazy that someone from the customer service department that performs this way and handles these types of tickets can actually move into the highly paid sales team. And I said, but 98% of the time that we took people like this and you've moved them in the past in your company, they performed well. That barrier to making a decision that might not seem natural or might not seem data logical might come down. So similarly, if I told you that people that have no finance background or no payment system experience and are instead excited developers who experiment frequently with open source technologies would make great blockchain experts or capable kind of in-house advisors, then you might rethink what your unconscious bias made you believe was the actual requirement to do that job.
Hi there. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with everyone. That's a lot for our group to churn on. Really appreciate it. I have sort of a two-part question, interrelated. Given that LinkedIn was just acquired, I think, by Microsoft recently, and they have to sort of they have to demonstrate that they're not just revenue neutral, but they have to really, put out some more robust features and drive shareholder interest. How do you see artificial intelligence being enhanced and integrated from your company with, HR personnel using LinkedIn? So your company and HR personnel and LinkedIn. And then second part of that, do you see artifacts like CVs, resumes, the traditional sort of economy that we use for getting your information out there? Do you see that going away as platforms like LinkedIn grow in favor and robust information? Thank you.
So that's a great question. One, I definitely agree with you. LinkedIn, if I were in the job board, job market space, and to witness Microsoft buying LinkedIn, you have to think that they're going to become a more powerful, growing company that does more. In terms of what will that mean or how do I think about that, for us, it's really just another data source or a data pool. So whether, and that's kind of the way that we think about it, we have an algorithm called Fetch, which when you create a job, instantly we can review over 20 million people. And when I say people, that's a LinkedIn profile, that's a resume, that might not be either, and that might be a contingent worker list of projects held to derive skills from that. So for us, we're data agnostic on the back end. So if LinkedIn grows and more people get on LinkedIn, I think one of the challenges we see with LinkedIn is that the types of people that are on LinkedIn have not changed dramatically. So for example, certain job types, certain skills, certain verticals, industrial and mining, hourly workforces, drivers, whatnot, millennials, for example, they might not be on LinkedIn. I don't think Microsoft's going to change that. I think what Microsoft might do is incorporate more LinkedIn knowledge and capabilities into enterprise suites, which is what Microsoft does best, is selling enterprise suites. But for example, HR systems, Microsoft doesn't have a recruiting performance management system that anyone we know uses. That's an IBM, Oracle, SAP, Workday, increasingly Cornerstone, and other type of world. And those are multi-year contracts where if you're an SAP shop, you'll usually be big on SAP. I don't see that changing. So maybe it's more robust, maybe they have more candidate data, maybe they can include online learning and skills data like with lynda.com to be able to better understand the talent that's there. But if you build an algorithm, it should be kind of data agnostic, so that doesn't really impact us. In terms of, does that answer the first question? Yeah. And in terms of the second question around, do I think, we'll hear sometimes, well, I think the resume is going away entirely and there will be no more resumes. Maybe, but at the end of the day, what is a resume? It's a list of job titles, it's a list of companies you worked at, it's a list of how long you worked there. An algorithm doesn't care what format that's in, if it's in a resume format. We also support, for example, a lot of jobs. We have certain clients where when they required a resume for these types of jobs, they had a very small candidate inflow. As soon as they released the resume requirement, talk about having that as a data insight to unlock different types of diverse populations, their application rates shot up because the people applying to their jobs actually were embarrassed and didn't have resumes and came from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds where they didn't have mentors to help them write a resume or advisors. And instead, that data set is captured by application data questions that ask you, where did you work, for how long, do you have experience in the restaurant industry or anything else? So again, if you build the right types of technology, understanding those data shifts, I'd say further, we did our first partnership and integration with the largest contingent gig worker database or system. That data doesn't look anything like a resume or a LinkedIn profile or even application data, because how you express that is no longer even in job titles. But at the back end, you should still be able to translate that into common first, second, third degree skills, industries, sub-industries, and categories. And that's where that kind of artificial intelligence can overcome what on a human level would be an unsurmountable challenge of understanding and reading all these different data types together, where an algorithm doesn't have that difficulty.
You said you're the top of the funnel. What processes do you have, if it's what you do, 2, 3, 5 years down the road to see how successful the candidates you've identified have been as opposed to traditional metrics?
Yeah. So one, we don't have to wait a few years because the first barrier was the manager who this person is supposed to work for more pleased with the people that were sent their way than before? We know the data before we were implemented. We know the data after. Usually it's called size of slate and conversion of slate, interview slate or first round slate or phone screen slate or something like that. So we have good clarity if we trust the managers to some degree. We also know the conversion of our candidates to offered or interviewed or hired. And then there's kind of the vision for fully connected recruiting and performance data. We still have a far way to go in most companies. Most companies do not have that data fully connected. We know that that's coming. That's one of the biggest shifts we see in the next 3 to 5 years, which can unlock for us, did these people perform well after they got hired? Today, usually we'll use proxies for that, which is, were they really a bad hire? That thing I mentioned, if they didn't show up for their first day of work, not a great hire. They were fired within 3 to 6 months, usually not good. Yes, there are factors that might have, maybe it was a bad manager or bad onboarding or bad training, but you can usually use proxies versus how well did they perform and how quickly. So what we like to say is we don't need to wait 3 to 5 years. There's data indicators that can help us know that even within the recruiting process of the quality of people that we recommend forward and those that get hired and the conversion of those we recommend to offers and interviews. And then kind of second state, the first year in, how did they perform? And as we get better and better connected data, we'll be able to actually use that in making and driving better predictions, hopefully to unlock less obvious career paths and things that bias are preventing you from doing more of that you should do today.
So you can massage the algorithm?
Pardon?
You can massage the algorithm?
Completely. Absolutely. So our algorithm, as should be most in any industry that's constantly evolving, every day a new job title exists that didn't exist yesterday. New degree programs at universities exist year after year after year that didn't exist before. So you have to build algorithms, in our space at least, that are adaptive learning and continue to evolve and feed based on real-time data.
So this will be our last question, this last question of the...
Okay, thank you. So slightly changing gears. In the field of trading, the markets, and I'm referring to currency markets, there are robots which actually assist us in trading. But then when the set parameters fail, then the robot indicates wrong trade and leads to a lot of loss. Is there any way that AI can be used to distinguish 1,000 small traders from one very large trader who places $200 million per trade, which has more of an impact than all the other traders put together?
So my head of algorithms would definitely have a viewpoint in that, and is a brilliant man, our entire data science team. In the short answer, I'd say I don't know what data is available to learn or trade off of. So do we have the data, and do we find correlations of small traders, what background they have, what type of computer they trade on. A lot of times things that correlate are non-obvious elements. Maybe that they use a Mac and not a Windows machine shows some correlation to types of technology adoption and types of stocks they make. I don't know anything about kind of this space algorithmically, but I would say just like with any problem, break down the data that's already available, how long it's been available for, because you want multi-year, multi-dimensional, and extensive amounts of data sets to be able to build any type of prediction algorithm, and then you would have to test and correlate. So.
In thanking our guest speaker today, Athena Karp.